Pode ser o Grupo Corpo ou a Companhia de Dança do Pantanal. Museu de Arte Moderna de São Paulo. Ou Arte em Cores. Filarmônica de Minas Gerais. Ou Programa Vale Música. Restauração do Museu Nacional. Ou da Cripta da Basílica de Nazaré. Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. Dos projetos que todo mundo já conhece, até aqueles projetos que todo mundo precisa conhecer. A cultura brasileira tem o nosso apoio. É valorizando essa cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
Mobilidade é vida. Somos a CCR. Estamos presentes em 13 estados brasileiros e em outros 3 países. Unidos por um único propósito: melhorar a vida das pessoas através da mobilidade. A inovação sustentável nos aponta a direção, as necessidades de nossos clientes, as oportunidades. Valorizamos os encontros, valorizamos a vida.
Caixa, o banco com milhões de clientes que sempre tem um olhar especial para quem mais importa, você. É por você que tem nos benefícios sociais a esperança para superar os desafios. É por você que tem direito à moradia digna e quer realizar o sonho da casa própria. É por um país que acredita na união e reconstrução, com mais diversidade, sustentabilidade e muitas oportunidades. Caixa, é por você, é por um novo Brasil.
Para não procurar o Sebrae. É empreendedor? Ligue, mande um zap, vá ao Sebrae ou ele vai até você. Ah, e tem tudo no portal. Sebrae, a força do empreendedor brasileiro.
Então, eu tive o privilégio de nascer numa família de navegadores. Meu avô veio para cá navegando, no começo do século passado, em 1900 e pouquinho. Trabalho lá no Instituto porque tenho esperança. E eu espero que tem muita coisa bacana rolando em Paraty. A Felipe é uma delas, o Instituto é outra delas, e tem outras muito bacanas. E eu espero que a força essa força do bem, né, somada e com a transformação feita nessas crianças que estão aprendendo a velejar no Instituto, ou que vão curtir ler um livro lá na praça durante a Flipinha. A esperança é essa, que esse trabalho que a gente vem fazendo, né, essa força do bem, que resulte em alguma coisa e que Paraty consiga sobreviver a esses novos tempos sombrios aí que a gente está vendo surgindo, né, com guerras e coisas muito ruins, né? Mas a esperança é que melhore, e eu acho que Paraty tem esse potencial dessa força do bem que ajuda muito a gente alimentar uma esperança de melhora. E assim, vislumbro que todas as crianças tenham oportunidades iguais, que a gente seja uma cidade que transborde cultura para o resto do país. Eu acho que essa é a grande aptidão de Paraty, aptidão náutica, natural, né? Dessas montanhas, desses parques fantásticos que tem aí, que estão conservados, graças a Deus, e dessa pegada cultural que Paraty teve, sobretudo com a vinda da Felipe para cá. A gente tem um lema lá no Instituto que fala que o Instituto Náutico é a escola que ensina a ler os ventos e escrever o rumo.
Felipe, o encontro da literatura com a cidade. Ministério da Cultura e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 21ª Flip, Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. A Flip conta com benefício da Lei de Incentivo à Cultura, Lei Rouanet, PRONAC 231427, e possui acessibilidade para pessoas com deficiência física, visual e auditiva. Tem patrocínio Master, Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Ouro, Itaú. CCR e Caixa. Patrocínio Prata, o Globo, Mac Imóveis e Sebrae. Patrocínio Bronze, Globo Livros e Eletronuclear. Parceria institucional SESC. Prefeitura de Paraty, Embratur e Museu do Território. É uma concepção, Associação Casa Azul. Realização, Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução. Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
Good morning. I am Fernanda Bastos, curator along with Milena Brito. Thank you. I would like to greet you all. Thank you all for being here. We started talking about Pagu. Pagu is referred to in all the titles of our roundtables. This is an inspiration that will follow us throughout this event. And I'd like to invite you all to participate in yet another meeting for Flip 2023. I would like to invite the editor and literary reviewer critique, Rita Palmeira, who will mediate this roundtable with Socorro Acioli, Felipe Charbel, and Leda Cartum. Are they going to leave me alone? Please, guys, come on. Leda, Felipe, and Socorro, please join me. Good morning, all of you. One and all. I know it's hot. It's such a joy to be back in Paraty, to participate in the 21st Flip. This is now, it's part of my emotional and professional calendar, and it's always such a joy to be back. I would like to thank Flip and their enormous team. You can imagine, but it's always good to remind you that for everything to happen, a lot of people are working backstage. So thank you all for organizing this. I would like to especially thank Fernanda and Milena, the curators of this edition, for having invited us generously, and especially for the challenge they proposed to me when they invited me to mediate or to moderate this roundtable with 3 immense talents of contemporary Brazilian fiction writing, and apparently they have nothing in common. Not even their accents, because each one is from a different place in the country. So thank God for that. But in all these differences, and thank you, God, for having them, these differences will just show us and will allow us to consider the different paths that the Brazilian contemporary literature will take. So this is a challenge that I accepted gladly, and I'm sure that I did well. But even more than that, when I stopped to consider what would bring together Felipe Charbel, Leda, Cartum, and Socorro Acioli, when I had to work on my own words, I wasn't as sure that there would be no common trait. They have or write books where certainties are always questioned, of course, each one in their own way. To me, this is a literary gesture by excellence, and I believe that they share the same idea. So now I will introduce the 3 authors and the works they produced, and then, of course, what is most important, I will pass the floor. Felipe Charbel was born in Rio de Janeiro. And why do I say this? Because this is an important data regarding the way he writes. He's a historian, he's a professor and a researcher at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And he also has a great production in this area, like his book published by Unicamp called Timoneiros. It was a rhetoric on Machiavel. And this was launched in 2020, and other volumes that he has organized. Outer walls of the academy, and I guess for him these walls are very low. He has dedicated himself to essays and fiction with a touch of fiction, because we know that there is a space for fiction, or maybe in a daily novels with whatever you can have with essays too. In one of his books, the narrator says that what he wants is to essay himself. And so he will mix these different genres, and at each book he will leave us waiting for more. Could you think about someone who is able to mix in the same text Gorgeous from Delogie de Helena and Nescau, the chocolate milk we have in Brazil? Someone who is able to talk about sentimental education at Flaubert and the sentimental education under which we all have gone through when we listen to Roberto Carlos, a very famous Brazilian singer. So he has 2 books as a fiction, which is Unreal Windows in the free translation, Janelas Irreais for Relicário, and Saia da Frente do Meu Sol, which was launched by Autêntica Contemporânea this year. Just to give you a taste of his prose before I actually introduce Leda, I will refer to a small excerpt of an email that was reproduced in which he addresses a person, a woman with which he has a relationship. And he said, I don't know if this serves you as consolation, but we will always have this universe made only of words. We will always have the logos. What makes me really sad and what I find revolting is that many others had Paris. Leda Cartum, she does lots of things, and I will only be able to refer to a couple of things she does. But all of them are related to writing, as she normally likes to highlight. She has a master's in literature in the University of São Paulo. She's a translator, and along with Sofia Nestrovsky, she is a writer of 20,000 Leagues, a podcast of books and science. So it's a pleasure to have Leda here too. And of course, she's also a writer. She's an author of As Horas do Dia, pequeno dicionário calendário, published by Sete Letras in 2012. O Porto, launched by Iluminuras in 2016. Bruno Schultz, Conduz Cavalo, published with Marcos Cartum, launched by Relicário. I'm not showing her books. I will. So Bruno Schultz, where is it? That's the book. In a partnership with Marcos Cartum by Relicário. This book is a short story that won the Off-Flip Award in 2014. And here it is. It has the designs or the drawings by Marcos, illustrated by Marcos Cartum. And with Sofia Nestrovsky, her podcast partner, the book 20,000 Leagues by Charles Darwin. It is a co-edition by Fósforo and Sesc. It was launched last year. This year, Leda published also by Fósforo, the Formas Feitas no Escuro. It's one of these books that the specialized reviews or critique. It's one of these books that specialized critics will place as a we cannot classify, unclassifiable. It is unclassifiable because she is always seeking something that we've seen this since the very beginning of her books. She's trying to find her own format, a literary, a way of writing that will be her own. And she does this through a writing that is never established. It is strong, however fleety. When we had dinner yesterday to talk a little bit about what we're going to do, we always have this backstage meeting. She will organize the characters and their actions of these snapshots that is Formas Feitas no Escuro. And just an excerpt, just to give an idea, is when she says, so you are a boat and the waves will throw themselves against your boat. And Socorro Acioli was born in Fortaleza in the state of Ceará in the northeast, and she is a prolific writer. She is a journalist at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. She's also a professor and coordinator of the writing and creation course of the University of Fortaleza. She is well known. I hope everyone has read this novel. And this was launched by Companhia das Letras, Oração para Desaparecer, in 2014. No, I'm sorry. She has more than 20 books. And between child books, Ela Tem Olhos no Céu, published by Editora Gaivota. And the book that she referred to previously was A Cabeça do Santo, and by Companhia das Letras. And she has a poetry book, which was launched this year by Círculo de Poemas. It's called Taquimadalar, The Invisible Islands, As Ilhas Invisíveis. She has a very personal way of writing, very Brazilian style. She has an acute understanding of things, and novels are her format, and she uses this as her narrative. A Cabeça do Santo is a wonderful story about a city that has an enormous Santo Antônio statue, and the head was never placed on the statue. So he is the patron of the city, and he's also the source of all the miseries of that city. And the classic characters that are always part of her books will just get things going and rolling in the city and makes everything worse. So her readers were patiently waiting, Cabeças from 2014, for her next book, her following book, which finally arrived, and it's already being reprinted, which is Oração para Desaparecer, A Prayer to Disappear, in a free translation. So what is not explained, it's magical. And then once again, it's part of her book. This time, the main character is a Brazilian woman, and she is unearthed in a Portuguese village, and she has no idea who she is. So now we will hear from them. I guess I already talked too much. So Felipe, Leda, Socorro, it's such a And Leda, it's such a pleasure to be here with you. So just to get things going, to warm things up, make things harder than they are now, I would like you to please talk to me of how you start writing your books. What is the research? What do you read to start preparing your books? And this is something I'm always curious about when it helps us understand who the writer is. At what time do you write? How frequently do you write? Do you rewrite a lot? How is the process? So that we can start to understand a little bit who you are. Who would like to start? So Leda, if you could. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Rita. I loved what you said about us. It's really good to hear about what we write, because sometimes we're so dedicated and focused, and sometimes when I hear someone commenting my text, my books, it seems like they will reveal something new to me, things that I'm no longer am able to know about myself. And so when someone tells me what I wrote about and I found something out, because it's as if someone who read me knows a secret that I am unaware of. So this is what I felt. So thank you for this introduction. So regarding your question about how we write, to me, and the way we write, it's difficult to answer actually, because in my books, as you said yourself, Rita, I'm always seeking something that has nothing established, well-defined. I start by what is not defined, the undefined. And I guess my attempt is to keep myself undefined until I define it through my writing. So I'm going to talk about formas feitas no escuro, forms created in the dark, in the free translation. This is the most recent book of mine. And I started by just throwing things in a notebook, not really sure what I was doing, like thoughts, ideas. And this happened, 7 years ago? And so what I did throughout these 7 years in more concentrated or less concentrated periods was to rewrite these texts, rewrite. And there's one thing I truly enjoy. I like to then pass it to the computer, digitalize it, and then it's like when you do that shift, the text becomes less personal. It's no longer yours. It belongs to something else. It's neutral in a certain way. So you start to perceive things on your computer that you don't actually see when you write by hand. So I pass everything to the computer, and then I see that whole block of letters, and I have a greater, keep it at arm's length, and then I'll go back to, handwriting. And so I come and go between these two media, and then I see that the text will mature. And more than that, what I feel in this very slow and long process of rewriting, because the texts are very short here in the book, right? So each one has gone through, I don't know, dozens of versions until we reach the final version. What I feel is that they will, accumulate different layers. So my impression is that at any given time, I am able to lose something from my text. It's not that at each version I lost the previous version. It's as if they are accumulating. They are being overlapped as a stone, as sedimentary, so they will accumulate in time. And this is why I like to write slowly and respect this long time of writing, which is how we accumulate knowledge.
We do not have access to the geological time of these 2 millions of years, but I feel that in writing I am able to access something of this. So I go on accumulating those layers, and when I read it back, when I read my own text, it is as if I was reading all of those years, and that somehow became recorded in this final version. So when you were introducing me, somehow you were revealing a secret of the text to me that I no longer know, because there is so much here inside that I am not able to read the text without knowing it. Those that read the text without having experienced all those years and living with the text for so long, they realize they find things that I am not able to see. And this is interesting. It's interesting to see this diversity present in each of those texts, and it's what's what I'm interested in, which is keeping a little bit of time in each text. And at what time do you write? Well, I have no right time, no discipline, no routine. I think that writing it is the moment in which I am less disciplined in my life, but I can say that I like to write when I'm outside. I like to go outside in the streets to write. I like to go for a walk, and when I'm walking, the text starts coming to my mind, and then I stop at a coffee shop and I sit down and I start writing. And then, of course, there is the second moment in which I go back home and then I transfer the text to the computer. But I need to go out for a walk so that things start moving inside my head. Hello, everyone. Rita, thank you very much for this introduction, and I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation. It is a great joy to be here with Socorro and Leda, and also to talk about this topic, which is what we like the most: writing, reading, and talking about literature. In my case, writing is very much related to thinking and taking notes. I spend little time at the computer writing. I like to think of what I'm going to do, and then I like to take notes until the moment the book can almost write itself. And of course, it does not happen like this. We need to work, rework, and transcribe this content. But this is the idea, to reach a procedure and a way of doing it in which the book would be quicker, faster to be done. So if I have an idea today, maybe I'm going to write about it years later. I can remain like 2 years, 1 year, 3 years, just taking notes and thinking of a specific topic. And is this writing? Sometimes people ask me, do you write every day? And I say, no, I don't write every day. No, it would be too much. It would be transforming writing into a work. But I think every day of what I'm going to write. I take notes every day. So in a certain way, I can say, yes, I do it every day. So here for Flip, of course, I brought my notebook because I wanted to make a flip journal. But of course, it did not work because yesterday I didn't write down anything. So no flip journal. And in the case of the Saia da Frente do Meu Sol, in a free translation, Get Out of the Way of My Sun, this process is even longer than in other texts, because there is a moment in the book in which I say that somehow I've been writing this book since I was 19 years old. Of course, I did not start to write the book when I was 19 years old, but it was the moment when I started to watch my uncle Ricardo and realize that his life had something different, and this would capture my boyish attention, but I did not know what. I couldn't pinpoint it. And when he dies, I remember that at his funeral, I was thinking, well, I would like to write about his life until today. And there were few people. It was a sad moment. But I did not see myself as a writer at the time. I was doing my master's and PhD and etc. Only later I had the idea to put it in the paper, and I failed. And failure is a constant companion until the moment I found his texts and then or papers and documents, and then I had some material based on which I could start writing. And in the book, I was working with the memories of what I could remember, the documents. I kept the pictures that I found. And then, yes, I was able to shape the book. And so writing has a lot to do with researching for me. And seeking a shape or looking for the shape of this book. If you find its shape, then I understand that it can work and it could be successful. And as for times and schedule, I cannot have them because I'm also a professor and I have a profession that consumes a lot of my time. And so I need to adapt my availability to my duties and obligations, and is made it in such a way that my times are very flexible. Whenever I can, whenever I have some spare time, a lot on Sundays or on vacation time and etc. Well, whenever I can, I write. Hello everyone, hello to my members of the panel here, Rita, Leda, Felipe. So thank you very much. I like very much Flip, but being here makes it even more special to me. It's a great joy to be able to speak of the most wonderful thing in our lives, which is literature. And what I've been doing is that in my writing process is that I find news or pictures of real situations, because the place where I was born, Ceará, is a fertile ground for interesting news. And it's interesting because we are living an immersive experience of Ceará. You are feeling like Samuel, for those who read Cabeça de Santo, walking under the hot sun. That's exactly that. We're having a sense of Ceará. Very sense-based experience. So usually I start with some news. There was the story of a city that had a St. Anthony's statue built for the purpose of religious purposes, and then they did not install the head piece by piece, but as a whole. And the person who was responsible for this, well, the people were saying that it was absurd, because the head that was there next to the statue, the body of the statue, was being used by animals and homeless people and etc. So we could not have the St. Anthony's head with some homeless people living inside. So you can already see how many stories we find in the news. It's impossible not to want to develop it. So there is also the story of the walls of a church and that were covered for many years, and they would never end the construction, and they would hear like the bells tolling, and they would do they would actually use the space as if it was there. And it was in many of those situations, I feel very lucky to have those stories falling into my lap. And in this case, Leonardo asked me to write 10, 15 texts based on a map. And I had just had a surgical procedure, and the doctor was showing me many pieces, many pictures and X-rays and of my gallbladder that was removed. But in the middle of this process, there was one of the plates, of X-ray plates, that looked like an archipelago, and it could be a map. It could be a map of my gallbladder, and that's what you see on the book. That's the picture of my gallbladder, and the biopsy was excellent. I had nothing wrong in it, and then I created a narrative based on it. So maybe the most important information, well, I started working as a journalist, and even though I had no career developed in the newspapers and etc., the training in journalism helps us to project consequences and see things under different views, and then I use any resource that I like to make the story exist, and it has always been like that. And as for the times and schedule, well, it depends. In the past, well, it took me a long time to write those books. 7 years one, 8 years the other. It would take a long time. I would go to places and travel, and then I would say, oh, I'm going to have concluded when I am there, and I wasn't capable, and people were complaining, and now I have children, so I use the morning times to write, and I am using the morning times to write in a more organized way than in the past. I thought of a question to you and Felipe that has to do for those who did not read Saia da Frente do Meu Sol and all the two books by Socorro, they always bring those characters that are crucial to the narrative. And they are those badly seen people, and in the city or in the place and the house. And Felipe's work speaks of this. And those no one knew anything about his life. So those cursed characters, they would, in Socorro's case, appear with a stranger arriving in town, or with this person. I'm not going to give you any spoiler, but this character, Cida Joana, who is also a cursed character. And I'm going to ask Felipe to address this. And Leda, I'm reaching you, okay? And so it's okay. I'm used to waiting. It's part of the research for my books. So Rita, Saia da Frente do Meu Sol is a book that has a lot to do with silence, it seems to me, because it is a silence, a quietness produced around the presence of Uncle Ricardo in the family houses, always as the person who would live in the back room. So there was a division, an organization of the houses space that in itself would draw my attention. I was always asking myself as a child, why is still Uncle Ricardo living in the back room? Of course, he would walk around the house and watch TV and etc. But why is it that people speak behind his backs in a very low volume, low voice, and etc.? What made him occupy this space within the family? So as a child, I had no idea, but it was something that drew my attention, and it was recorded in my mind somehow. And then until the day that he went to live with us. He came to live with us, and I was 21 years old. I was doing my university studies, and then he goes to my house, and he lives in the back room. And it's a moment in which we were closer. He liked very much soccer, and so we would watch the matches together, but he wouldn't speak of his life. And then he dies, and I think of writing about him, and I start understanding already as an adult that his place in the house had to do with the way he would live his sexuality, and it was exactly the reason why he was so silent, so quiet, and things that the family would say, the sentences that I started reminding myself of. I can almost hear them in a voice which is the voice of the family, and not the voice of someone specifically, but the voice of a choir, and in which people tell that he wasn't married, but once he had a fiancée, and he would leave early on Friday and come back on Sunday. And I would think, well, how could someone that goes out on Friday and comes back on Sunday did not live a very nice and exciting life? So I was wondering many things, and I started to remember all of those aspects. So it's not a memory book, but it is based on those small threads of memory, and that's what I started to do. I built a book based on very little, and I have a diploma in history, and I wanted to do the opposite of what historians do. Even though there is the issue of documents and archives and etc., I started to think I'm going to tell a story with very few threads of memory, very few documents and sentences that I pinpoint on those documents, and the sentences that are not many either. So I was wondering, can I tell a story only with this? I don't want to interview anyone. I don't want to do any research. I don't want to have a biography, a huge biography. I want to work with little. And I thought that it could be a very interesting challenge to find this new way of telling a story, keeping the quietness, the not sad, and preserving also the mystery of a life, because every life is a complex and mysterious life, and the idea of the book is to keep it like that, in such a way that I could investigate all. I could use my imagination. I could fantasize about his life, and maybe the pictures that I found of himself on the beach, always handsome, always looking happy, a very happy life and sunny life. So that's the idea. That was the idea of the book. So you removed him from the place of cursed characters, yes, but also keeping his time, or going to Lapa, the neighborhood in downtown Rio. So was I could not domesticate him. Of course, I needed to keep his bad moods and etc. Yes, before giving the floor to someone else, you do it a lot based on the pictures that you find. You imagine things based on the pictures. It's really a different exercise from what historians do. What about your cursed characters, Socorro? No, I'm going to speak of the central character of Prayers to Disappear, Oração para Desaparecer, because it was different from Cabeça de Santo. In the Cabeça de Santo, the character was already there, all of them. But in the case of this last book, a friend of mine called me to say that she saw the picture of a church that was buried for 45 years. She was at an exhibition in Ceará, and every time a friend of mine sees something they consider to be very odd, they say it has a lot to do with me. So usually those are very odd news. And for instance, there was this guy who was buried and people were mourning him and etc. And 3 days later he was there. And also the news about the dog that every time goes to the same place at the same time and etc. So people send me those news, and there is a very nice, interesting story of a small business in the countryside of Ceará. And they found out that in some cities, women, if they died and they wanted to be married but didn't, they would be buried with their wedding gowns. And then the lady found it out, and she would go from cemetery to cemetery, like taking those wedding dresses, wedding gowns, and washing them and selling them. It was a very bizarre kind of business that I heard of. And those are the things, the news that people send to me, the stories that they send. And when she sent me the picture of this church that had been buried for 45 years, I found out that it was a place in Tremembé, and the church had been built as an agreement between secular priests in the region that was trying to convert the Tremembé indigenous people, because they found a saint. It's a classical history in many countries. They tell the same story. It took place in Aparecida, that indigenous people find a Catholic saint, and then they recover it, and then they start to pray to this saint statue, and it was found in a hot day, and so it was a shiny one, so it was related to flames and etc. And then those religious people, they said, well, we want to build this church, but we want to stay with the saint itself. And then they had enslaved people and indigenous people, the Tremembés, that would participate in the building of the church. They would bring the shells from the sea, and they would mix it with all the elements necessary to build the walls of the church. But there was no the money of the Portuguese crown. But I did not know how to start telling the story, because I'm not a historian, anthropologist, etc., and I did not want to make any mistakes either. But when I was almost giving up, when I thought I wouldn't be able to do it, like researching on some documents on the restoration of the church, the architect says, according to Drummond, and then I was there researching for 3 days at the National Digital Library, and I found the document that was mentioned. And in the chronicles, he was asking for anyone to compose a poem or write something about this small church. And then he tells the complete story of the church. And then he tells us that when the church started to be filled with sand, the bishop of the region went there to see, well, this is a condemned building. It will be buried by the sands naturally, but we're going to take the statues.
And then a whore called Joana Camelo, a prostitute. She didn't want the saints to go, so she threw her shoes on the head of Padre Tomás. And I just loved the story. I thought, oh my God, that's for me. And so I had my character. I had a prostitute who would throw her shoes on the head of a priest. It's everything I needed. So she became my protagonist, my main character. And then I had a story that I could follow. This, as we were saying yesterday, this is also written based on different statements given by the elderly of that region. From Tacajuba and also from Portugal. But many elderly gave their statements, and I was able to interview someone who was a child at the time and was able to unearth. Said, oh, things will come and show up in Portugal. So he gave me all the keys I needed to open these doors, including the prayer to disappear, oração para desaparecer. So it's a prayer that the Tremembés will pray in order to disappear. And it's at the end of the book, right? Yes. But it's not the right one. That's not the true one. I thought it wasn't. People will skip. I can say, if you want to disappear, I might want to give you that letter. So I said, oh, you skip, because I was afraid. I was afraid something was going to happen. So I decided not to include it. So I invented one in order to, I didn't want anyone to disappear and blame me for disappearing. So. Yeah, you can read it 9 times. There's this whole ritual you have to follow, and it works. But Socorro, we hope we won't disappear. Let's not read the right one. I forgot to let you know that you can send questions in writing. I'm not sure if we will have time, but anyways, just submit them. So Leda. I was kidding with Leda the other day about time and waiting, because there is a story about the publication of Oporto, her book. The one who was launched by Iluminuras, and she heard this advice of Leon, who was her editor, saying, Leda, you have to learn how to wait, you have to be patient. And I found it quite curious, because Formas Feitas no Escuro is a book about time. Not only because it works with the idea of the present, the past, the future, but because you will bring together a number of objects and from other times, other moments. So it's a book in which time is an important character, or important category. Now that you have already waited, please, Leda. Well, Samuel said this in 2015. And the book was ready, and I was writing it. I don't know, 5-6 years I had been writing. So Samuel loved the book. I said, let's publish it, but it will only be launched next year. This was January 2015, so I would have to wait a whole year. I waited a year and a half, actually. And I waited to talk to him. I said, well, can't we just now maybe launch it a little bit before? It's been maturing for so long, and I really wanted it to be published. And Samuel said, Leda, you're young. You can learn how to wait. And when he said that, I could not turn him down, this advice of learning to wait, because I feel that writing has to do with patience. It's a work of patience. More than anything else, writing is a work of patience. And I can see this because we write, and sometimes we feel anxious, we want things to get ready and to be good, and it won't be good if we're not patient. We have to be patient to live for the world we live. As everything is so immediate. We have this great difficulty of waiting longer and also passively. I like what Felipe said about, sometimes books write themselves, and our movement is sometimes minimum. It's just don't interfere. Something is happening by its own will. So it has to do with patience. It has to do with being alert, and also waiting. So as you said, Rita, you said that Formas Feitas no Escuro is a book about time. I guess the things I write, I do understand that it's not maybe about time or just essays or attempts to try and find time, to capture something from time. And this morning, I woke up and thought about what I was going to say today. I wasn't sure, right before this presentations we had. I woke up, I couldn't remember my name. So I was at my hotel rereading my book so that I could connect and be reminded of myself, of the book, and how I was when I wrote the book. Because as I said, it was a long time producing this book, and it's been a long time since I published it, at least for me. Lots of things happened since then. So I was reading, and I remembered in this rereading, I thought about one of the things that was one of the principles of why do I write? Where does this will to write come from? And it has to do with what you said, Heath. I was reminded of this book I read about a Ruth Kluger, a survivor from the Second World War. It's called Paisagens da Memória, Passages from Your Memory, or Landscapes from Memory. She says that she was in a concentration camp for maybe a year. And when she left the concentration camp, she wasn't even being freed. The war hadn't ended. She was being dislocated to another field, another concentration camp. But in the train, she saw the Poles, the Polish people living their lives. And she said, well, I was here in this concentration camp, all of the Polish people, neighbors, were living their life as if nothing was happening. And she said that it was at the moment that she finally understood what she was living. And then she was aware of the miracle of simultaneously. And it's as if I was able to understand things that stopped me from sleeping since I was very small, since I was a kid. This feeling that everything is happening at the same time. We are here now, there's a war happening, there are people dying, there are people being born, there is maybe a whale diving under the sea and maybe having a baby whale, and everything is happening now. And for years and years, and when I was a child, and I was saying, well, how can I sleep? I can't sleep with all things going around, happening around the world. So as I became older, I saw that this simultaneity is not just spatial, it is also temporal. Things become even greater because we're not only living with everything that is happening now in this space, but also we are living with everything that has already happened in time. Because all things that happened before are part of what we are living now. Everything is also simultaneous. So to study history, to go back to the past, is understanding who we are, what we are. The work I do on my podcast with Sofia Nestrovsky, now I'm studying 17th century with Galileo Galilei. And it's so good to work because I am understanding how the 17th century is different from what we have today. Why? Because in the 17th century, man started to see mountains on the moon. He had this instrument, and no one knew exactly what it is, that was able to bring together to have a blow up of the moon, and he was able to see, he saw mountains and valleys on the moon. And this is why we think how we think today. So this simultaneity, the miracle of some simultaneity is because things happen in the past as they did. I guess this is what I try to capture in a certain way in what I write. I guess that's it. Thank you. I am afraid of the next question because Socorro talked about disappearing. Leda talking about spontaneity. I don't know what Felipe will say now. I'm not sure. We said that they would read excerpts from his book, very short excerpts, so that, so you have a taste of their book, of their work. And Felipe hasn't told me yet that we have to stop. So I'm going to ask Leda to start, because I guess it has to do with what we're talking about here. And then Socorro, and then I will go to Felipe with a question. Okay. I have to find it here in my pile of books. So I'm going to read this excerpt of the first part of the book. Since the early morning when waking up, a man would run. At the end of the long days, he was able to see himself in front of his house's door. He would then catch his breath, he will stop running, and then he would finally arrive and close, window per window, each one of the rooms. But still, there were certain open areas, cracks that were not perceived by him. In the dark, through these cracks, we would have the tentacles of a octopus coming in, and they would take over the house and drag themselves. They would go beyond the rooms, and they will come around his bed. The man would even skip in one of the tentacles when he was once again running again to try to reach the switch. As soon as he was able to turn on the light, the octopus will hide. The tentacles would retract, and everything would disappear under the floor, the wooden floor. The rooms, now eliminated and all of a sudden empty, would grow in size. They became immense, and the man was able to see the walls that seemed so distant, as they, little by little, even more distant. Thank you. Socorro. So it's the beginning of Oração para Desaparecer. I woke up with my eyes glued by mud, my nose full of sand, and my mouth full of sand. And someone buried me. I had bugs walking in my mouth and my ears and going into my flesh. Underground, it was cold and agony, and it stank. I couldn't feel my arms, my legs, in the darkness of that cove. I thought I would die. I thought I would be undone, and I would become dust. No one knows what to do when they die. When I was praying for the end, I felt that I was being tightened with a giant hand and involved my whole body and started to throw me out. And my eyes closed as if I was being burned, the good hours of Our Lady, and everything became despair. So just for you to, just a little taste so that you go out and buy my book. Felipe, I guess you will talk a little bit about this excerpt that you are going to read. It has to do with this. But yesterday when we were talking, I said that the epigraph of your book, which is given to an anonymous writer, says, he left no children, no assets, and he died without any known will. This is the notary who bears witness to the death of Uncle Ricardo. But there's something so of Machado de Assis in your writing. And I guess this is going to read something that has to do with death certificate. Yes, it is the epigraph. Hey. It's very curious because why do you have to be a notary? So he didn't leave. So this is exactly an excerpt of the death certificate of Ricardo, and I found it very literary. I thought it could be, you can find literature everywhere, and even in a death certificate. So I'm going to read this excerpt. It's sort of a comment for this death certificate thing. So in the same pile of papers, I found the death certificate of my uncle's death certificate. And differently from all the documents that are in that big plastic bag, this one here speaks directly to me, to my memory, because I was the person who reported Ricardo's death. I was the one who informed the funerary agent, or whoever was that tall, thin man with yellow skin that had a blue buttoned shirt, everything that was written in that piece of paper. He left no children, no assets, he was not an elector, and he died without any known will. And I read this sentence, I reread it, and find it quite amazing. And I ask myself, what is left for Ricardo after the sequence of negative things? In the bureaucratic final act of his life, the life of this man is reduced to everything he relinquishes. And he decided not to have children, maybe as a natural result of a marriage, to build some kind of asset, to leave something behind for the children he did not have, to meet all the necessary obligations, such as voting, to distribute his inexisting equities or words that were laconic, so that his name could continue to stay in the mouths of the living. But my uncle's life is not projected 1 millimeter ahead. It's as if he was erased, and that was his final legacy, his only inheritance or legacy. Socorro, in Oração para Desaparecer, at a given moment, Cida says, I have decided to live. To live is just waiting to remember, because she could not remember her past. So at that moment, she decides to stop seeking her past so that she's able to live. And there's this visit she will do to Felix Ventura, this man who invented pasts and an interesting character, complex thing. And he has this idea that he will build a past in order to decide not to remember. This is how you remember a memory in your book, especially. If you maybe could talk a little bit about memory and how you work with it. Now, first, I would like to talk about Felix Ventura. It was a character from José Agualusa. I needed to decide how I would narrate this first part of the book. I needed her to narrate the lack of memory, of knowing who she was. The only thing she did know when she leaves her grave and she's unearthed by a couple, she knows she's Brazilian because they recognize her accent. And also a necklace, a shell necklace, a Búzios necklace she takes around her neck. So she will be for some time still trying to remember who she was. And I thought it would be good to have a character who will work inventing pasts for people who have to, escape for whatever reason. And but it was quite the other way around, because she truly didn't remember. She had to move forward. She had to move ahead. And this idea of rewriting her own past to understand life is something which I find quite interesting with psychoanalysis as a patient, not as a psychoanalyst, and to consider that in this understanding and dealing with words, to build this path of rebuilding from ruin and look ahead. We talked about abandoned cities and ruins, that to redo something based on a ruin is always a topic that is brought to me. This church, after it was unearthed, was completely destroyed because of humidity. It had to be redone. The city of also the statue with the saint, with the headless saint, happened also the same thing. But in this case, I needed her to forget everything, so that whenever she did remember, the book will take another path to go back to where she came from, where everything happened, and the situation in which she became, or she disappeared. She disappeared in such a magical way because of the prayer. And it's and the memories ends up in the Cabeça do Santo, the character also has to go back to the memory of that city, the remembrance, to come close to what he wanted, which is to find his father. In the beginning, he wants to find his father because he wants to kill his father, but he has to rebuild the memory of the city, he has to lose the memory of the city in order to meet his father. I guess we do this all the time. We also have to reread our life. As Leda said today, she had to, go the different writings. Felipe did this too, looking back to his infancy, his childhood, to rewrite his uncle's story in such a way that might brought some kind of comfort. I loved your books. They have maybe brought you some comfort of giving a new format to this character that was part of your past.
I think that we do it all the time. We need to do it all the time to move on. Okay, I've just been informed that we have only 10 minutes left and we still have 10 questions. So I'm going to need a prayer for the people back there to disappear and stop telling it to me. So because we spoke of it yesterday and because I think it is a funny moment, not necessarily for Felipe in the story that he tells us, but I would like for you to tell us about you meetings, any writers that impacted your work, like be it in inspiration, be it in terms of your books. And Socorro is going to tell us about her meeting with Garcia Marquez and the workshop she did. That you don't need to tell us about the workshop, but about Garcia Marquez. And Felipe tells us in Janelas a reading by Philip Roth that he watched on New York, and it has to do with his work. And yesterday I was asking Leda, okay, Leda, who would be your writer? I want to ask you this question too. And then we remember that she has a book on Bruno Schulz, who is a writer that she met. Leda, you have the floor. Okay, I'm gonna try to be brief. We have less than 10 minutes now, so very quickly, this book, Bruno Schulz Conduz Cavalo, Bruno Schulz Leads a Horse. It was a book that came out spontaneously. It's like one of those books that writes itself. And Bruno Schulz, for those who do not know him, he's not very known. It's a Polish writer, and it's the second time I mentioned Poland in this warm weather. Origins, as Socorro was saying, we cannot avoid our own origins. Not that they are Polish, but the Eastern European region, I cannot escape from it. So he was a Polish writer in the beginning of the 20th century that I started reading, and I was totally immersed in his absurd, oniric world, and it was a very fantastic world in his writing, and in the world that he leads. And I use this word lead because I woke up one day with this sentence in my head: Bruno Schulz leads a horse, and it looked like an analysis, but it became a short story, and it is a little bit the methodology applied by Bruno Schulz himself. I can't say that he has a methodology, but the feeling that I have is that he starts leading something, but very quickly he allows himself to be led by the thing. And so his books, in his books, he is little by little embraced by those things that he starts leading in the very beginning. And it happened to me a little bit like that, because what happened is that the text was leading itself into becoming a short story. So it was a moment of meeting Bruno Schulz. And I found out later that there is a record of the drawings by Bruno Schulz, because he would draw on a wall. It's in a museum in Israel, in which he pictures himself leading a horse. It was, and I didn't know about it, so it was really a moment. I met him, even though he died during the war. In the case of Philip Roth, for me, he was always a writer that marks my desire for writing, because when I read Philip Roth, I wanted very much to write. At the same time, I knew I would never write like him because he has a unique style, and at the same time, he can be a colloquial and classical at the same time. And so it was reading Philip Roth that I remember having felt like I wanted to write. And when it came to me the idea of writing a journal of rereadings, well, for those who did not read my book Janelas, in this journal of rereadings, I reread books that were important in my life, and then I start to bring back the notes I took and the comments I made and etc., and trying to find out the person I was. And I chose one of his works, and I was in New York on a sabbatical period, and a friend of mine bought tickets to watch this reading by Philip Roth, but he could not attend it, so he offered me the tickets, and I said yes, of course. I remember the tickets were super expensive, and then I went there, and it was wonderful. And he read an excerpt by Sabbath Theater, and he read very well. He had an incredible presence, and I was moved. And the next day I read on newspapers that it was his last public reading. And I think to myself, well, I was there. That's incredible. And in chapter 2 of Janelas Irreais, I tell about an important part that has to do with this fascination with this writer, a productive fascination that leads you to write. Just one point, Felipe. A little bit earlier in the book, I think that you were at a dinner and you cannot be late to the reading, and then according to the text, you mentioned to someone that you were going to watch this person, and the person reacts with disdain. So you had to deal with a kind of rejection to Philip Roth's person. Yes, I was in a party. It was the only time I was invited to go somewhere when I was in the US, and I had to leave early, and I was very proud when I said that I was going to watch Philip Roth, and I thought that people would envy me, and people said, oh, he's old, he's outdated, and etc. And so that's exactly what's in the book. Well, I see that we have a very few time, so my story with Garcia Marquez is very long. When the way I reached his workshop, and I've told it in many videos, and it's funny and also moving because there were many challenges and obstacles, but I'm not going to tell it because it's too long. We have no time, but next year I can tell it completely, okay? And so people always ask a lot about the workshop, and I tell about the course, and some things I never told anyone because... So you have time to tell it here because they were more of an intimate nature. There was two things that I thought about. Well, it was his last workshop because he was already with a compromised memory. He would not remember everything. He would repeat things in the present, and his recent memory was compromised, and he was very weakened, and he from 2006 to the time of his death, he was very bad, and he ends up not even recognizing his wife and kids and etc. So it was very moving and painful to see the old age of this author of which I had read practically everything that everyone admired, and to see his fragility of this human being, Garcia Marquez, that was walking towards the end of his life, and it was very sad. But at the same time, when I was listening to him, he would say that the things that marked his life the most were all the friends to whom he wrote his books. He spoke of his friends a lot and his family. And it made me think a lot of what's important in the end of the day, because at any moment he mentioned a Nobel Prize or any other prize that he won by writing his books. Everything he mentioned were books, friends, and family. And the other thing is that the day that I mentioned, I told him about Cabeça de Santo, and he was praising my book and my story. I was very young and inexperienced, and I did not know yet how you could be sure of what you wanted to do in life. But he taught me to be sure when he said that I had created a story I liked to talk about. And when I told about the story, I was very happy. And he told me at a moment outside the classroom, he liked the way I was happy when I was telling about the story of my book, A Cabeça do Santo. And so he taught me how to understand it was the right way to take. And when I was moving from the classroom to the apartment I was lodging in, I was asking God to make me believe in the things that I chose for myself. And that's what remained from his workshop and his meeting. Our timer is telling us that the time is over. Last question, quickly, just say yes or no. In your books, there's a lot of dreaming. Do you dream a lot? Yes, a lot. Yes, and I forgot almost everything. Yes, I do, but I only remember few dreams, and they are unforgettable. I would like to thank very much the audience, all of you who attended this session, Socorro, Felipe, and Leda, and let you know that they are going to sign their books at the Flip bookstore. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.